Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make this Art Deco beaded Kumihimo necklace. And this is what it looks like. So you have your Kumihimo braid here going all the way around up the side, so then the clasp at the back. And then in the middle here we have this section using SuperDuos that are in the braid, and then also SuperDuos and some more seed beads, but also these bicones to achieve this Art Deco inspired effect. Gives a really nice decoration in the middle, and that's going to hang nicely on the neckline. So I came up with this design here because I previously made a bracelet that looks like this. So you can see same Art Deco effect there with that Kumihimo braid right in the middle. So if you want to, obviously you can make a set, they're going to match nicely. But then if you want to learn how to make the necklace of it, then keep watching. These are then the materials that we're going to be needing. First of all, here I have my round Kumihimo disc because there's a round braid structure that we're making. And then for that as well, I'm using this point formula S-lon cord just in black, because the main beads I'll be using are black as well, so they're going to match nicely in case you can see any of the cord. And here I then have the different beads that I'll be using. Now first of all, these two are going to be used to make the braid with. So I have SuperDuos. This specific one is a metallus turquoise colour. And then I have 8 Miyuki seed beads in opaque black, also for the braid. So we're going to be using the SuperDuos while making the braid. And I just chose to use the other seed beads here, a black colour, because that will make the SuperDuos stand out nicely. But you can obviously choose whatever colours that you want to use. The SuperDuos then are also going to be used after we made the braid to add the embellishment, but also alongside the rest of the beads here. So I also have 11 Miyuki seed beads, again opaque black, and then I have 15 Miyuki seed beads, really tiny ones, also black. And then finally here as well, also the embellishment to add a bit of bling. I have 2.5mm Swarovski bicones. And I'm going to be adding in all these extra beads after we made the braid using this S-lon size D thread along with the beading needle. Now you can also easily use, say, Fireline. That will work really nicely for this project as well. And then finally, to finish off the braid, then we're using these Kumihimo ends to finish them off so we can use our findings as well. So I've got a locked claw clasp, extender chain and my jump rings. Obviously use whatever clasp that you want to. So let's get all the materials together and let's get started. So what I then have here first of all are some lengths of my S-lon cord that's meant for the braid. So I have 4 lengths of about 2 meters each. So they need to be fairly long obviously because it is a necklace that we're making. What I've also then done is I've made sure all the ends are even, and then I folded all the cords over in half and put the ends together, just like that, to find where the midpoint is, where I've then tied a knot, and then just attached a piece of scrap wire here to help pull it down through the disc. So now I'm going to take these cords and attach them to the Kumihimo disc. So this is then what it looks like when I've attached it to the disc. So I put that knot with the scrap piece of wire down through the center of the disc here, the hole in the middle. And then I distributed the rest of the cords, so I have 2 on each side of the top dot and 2 on each side of the bottom dot, so they're across from each other in pairs, and the same with the ones on the side. So just make sure you have basically 4 pairs across from each other evenly on the disc like this. And then I want to start making the braid here, and before I add in any beads I want to have a little section of the braid with just the cord. So what I'm going to do is take my top left one here, release that from the disc and bring that down. Stay on the left side of the bottom pair, and then I'm going to release the bottom right cord from the disc and bring it up and stay on the right side. So that's one pair. Then I'm going to turn my disc for the next pair here, so a quarter, then do the same thing, the top left one, release it and bring it down, and then the bottom right one, release that and then bring that up. And that's another pair done. Turn your disc another quarter and then just keep repeating like this. And do this until we have about 1 to 2 centimeters of braid. So I now have my little braid there. You can see coming out of the back, starting to form. So once we're in this position now, it's time to start adding the beads onto all the lengths of cord. So this is then how I've added all the beads onto all the lengths of cord here. As you can see, there's 8 O's on all of the lengths, but then we have 2 of the lengths here that also have SuperDuos on them. So then just to go through them, I start with my top left one here. What we have first of all is 58 8 O's, and then we get into the SuperDuo section, and we have 6 SuperDuos separated with 3 8 O's between each of them. And then after the last SuperDuo, we then have 55 8 O's. And then the right cord up here, that has 134 8 O's all the way. And then on the side here, the top one has also got 134 8 O's. and the bottom one of the side ones has got 133 ADOs. And then the bottom right one down here is again one with SuperDuos on. So first of all we start out with 56 ADOs, and then we reach the SuperDuos. So again I have 6 SuperDuos here separated by 3 ADOs in between each of them. And then after the last one we finish off with 57 ADOs. And then the left one of the bottom two here has again got 134 ADOs on. Moving on to the side of the disc, so the other side here, the bottom one has got 134 as well. And then the top one has again got 133, same as the bottom one on the right side. So that's then the setup of all of these beads. But if you wanted to make this necklace longer, you could easily do that by adding more beads to it. So what you would really need to do is add the same amount of ADOs to all of the lengths here. Now there's just one thing to pay attention to, is if say you want to add 10 extra beads to each length, make sure you add the same amount to each one. You just want to pay attention to the ones with the SuperDuos. You want to add half on each end. So that would be 5 at the beginning and then 5 on the other side and the end there of the SuperDuos. Just so you make sure that those SuperDuos still stay in the middle. And it's the same principle really for taking beads away if you want to make it shorter as well. And then the final thing I just want to mention is that these beads here are set up for the way that I work with my braid. So I always start with my top left one, bring that down, then I take the bottom right one and bring that up. So if you start with either the top left one or the bottom right one, because they're the same as each other, you want to set up the beads exactly like I've done here to achieve the same effect. But if you start with either the top right one or the bottom left one, again they're the same as each other, then you want to set the beads differently. And what that is basically, imagine you have a mirror in front of your disc and you set the beads up in that mirror image. So that means the top two, just the positioning of the beads here, not the cords themselves, they will swap place. So the ones with the SuperDuos, they would go over to the other one. The same with the bottom ones here. And on the side, they would also swap over the middle. So the top ones will swap with each other, and the bottom ones will swap with each other as well. And that way we can achieve the exact same braid. But then otherwise, we now need to start adding the beads into the braid. So I'm just going to pick my braid back up and continue in the exact same way. So I'm going to take my top left cord, but then as I'm releasing that from the disc, I also want to drop down my very first bead. So just one bead at a time here, let that drop all the way down into the middle. And then as I'm bringing it over, make sure that bead tucks underneath the cord in the middle there. That's going out to the side, and then bring it down. So it's the exact same braid structure, we're just adding in basically a bead every time we make a movement. And then the bottom right one here, release it, let the bead drop down, and tuck it into the middle, and then place that at the top. Turn your disc for the next pair, and then we just keep going like this, adding in a bead every time we make a movement with a cord. And it's the exact same principle once we get to the SuperDuos right in the middle here. You just want to add them in the same way. You can't just pay attention to them, making sure that the outer hole that hasn't been used sticks out away from the braid, but they will most likely naturally do that anyway. But just keep an eye on it, because obviously we want to make sure that all these beads end up on the outside of the braid to achieve the effect that we want. So just keep doing this until you used up all of the beads. So then here at the end, once I've finished adding in all the beads on the cords here, I'm then going to continue braiding for a bit, just with the cord, because I want a little section of braid just like right at the beginning there. So I'm just going to continue the braid for about the same length, 1 to 2 centimeters. And then I just want to secure the end in place here so I can securely take it off my disc. So I'm going to go to the pair that I was due to take next, not the one that I just used. And then I'm going to take cords that are diagonally opposite each other, release them and bring them across the middle, and then tie a knot with them. And tighten that all the way down at the end of the braid. And then take the other two from that pair and do the same thing. And tighten that right there. So I'm just basically building knots on top of each other here. And then turn to the other pair and do the same thing again. Just taking 2 cords at a time that are diagonally opposite each other. Tightening that knot, and then the final ones here, also making a knot across the middle, tightening right on the end, but because it's the final one, I just want to make a double knot to make it more secure. So we can then take it off the disc and then it won't come undone easily. And then here we have the braid. So we end up with the SuperDuos sitting right there in the middle, basically in a straight line on one side of the braid. And up the sides, we just have our seed beads. So on the very ends here, on one end I can just remove this wire just to get that end ready to be able to finish it off. And then here, what I just want to do is add a bit of glue around where all the cords are coming out from. And then I'm able to, once it dries, cut them off so we then have all the excess cord away. And we can then finish off this end nicely as well. So now I want to start adding in the embellishment here. So I have my braid ready, and then I've just taken a length of my thread, about a wingspan or so, and then I put a needle on one end, and also on the other end I tied a knot, just like that. This is going to be a stopper, so we obviously can add the thread here and it's not going to pull through. So first of all, I want to attach the thread to the braid. So I'm actually going to go through, I'm just going to start from one end, and I want to go through the very first SuperDuo. But what I actually want to do is go through the hole that's in the braid. So not the outer one, but the one that's already got a cord running through. And I've made the knot big enough so it won't pull through the holes in the SuperDuo there. Because I obviously want to attach the thread, but I also want to try and hide it so it's not going to be obvious in the final piece. So just like that. And then what I want to do is, because I want to make sure it's nice and secure before we move on, because obviously we don't want this to be able to come undone with wear. So I'm going to, right in front of that SuperDuo where I'm coming out, I'm going to go straight through the braid to the other side. Just the braid, not any of the beads in the braid. Just going to go through it here and pull it all the way through. And then I'm going to go back through the opposite direction again, but a little bit to one side from where it's coming out from. And again, just straight through the braid, not any other beads. And then as I'm pulling this, once I pull all the way on this end, the thread is just going to nestle in between the beads and become completely invisible there. And you want to do this a few times, going back and forth. That's going to really secure this nicely in place. And when I've then gone through a few times here, what I want to do is make sure the needle comes out in the right place for when I then want to start adding in the beads. So I'm coming from that upper side down again towards where the SuperDuos are. But where I want to come out is right in front of this bead here. So we have a single bead in the braid that's right across from the very first SuperDuo there, but there's two of the seed beads that are sat next to each other in between them. So I'm coming out right there, pulling it all the way through. Again, making sure it just tucks into the braid. And then I actually want to then go through that bead that we're coming out in front of. So just that one there. Go straight through it as if you were just bead weaving. So again, we have a seamless thread that's not going to show up anywhere. So we're now in the position where we actually want to start adding in beads. So I want to then get some of my SuperDuos ready here, because we're going to add more of them in. And then also we need 11 seed beads. So I'll just get some of them ready as well. And then we can bring the braid back in here. I'm going to be working from one end towards the other one. So we're starting where the thread is. So first of all, I need to get to the very first SuperDuo, but in the outer hole, because that's the ones we'll be using to add in this embellishment. So I need to get from that bead in the braid to that SuperDuo, but without having any thread on show. So I'm going to add 3 of my 11 and then go through the outer hole in that very first SuperDuo, hole that hasn't been used yet, and pull the thread all the way through. And then that's going to sit just like that and pretty much just blend in nicely, hiding that thread. So now we get into the proper pattern here. So what I'm going to do is first of all add 3 SuperDuos to my needle, and then I want to jump to the next SuperDuo in the braid, again in the outer hole. So bring that through all the way, making sure it doesn't get tangled here. And they're going to sit and kind of flop around like that. So don't worry too much about that just yet. And then the next gap we want to fill here from this SuperDuo to the next one after that, we need to then add 4 of our 11 O's and then jump to the very next one. And I'm kind of working with this in a curve as well, so how it's going to hang on the neckline, because the way we're adding the beads is going to then end up permanently having that curve, so they fit nicely together, just like that. And then after that, I'm going to add another 3 SuperDuos, jump to the next one, bring it all the way through, just straighten them out if they tangle up a little bit, but don't worry about, like I said, if they're flip-flopping around like that. And then again, the next one after that, adding 4 of our seed beads and jump over to the next one. And you just continue like this all the way to the other end, alternating between the 3 SuperDuos and then the 4 seed beads here. So at the other end here, what I want to do is finish this off the same way that I started it, just so we have a nice and seamless transition. So again, I'm going to add 3 of my seed beads, and then we need to go through that bead that's in the braid, that's straight across from the SuperDuo. So right there, where you have those other 2 seed beads in the braid in between them. And obviously we don't need to finish off the thread yet. I'm just doing this to make sure both ends become the same in the pattern. So there we go. And then what I want to do is just go back and forth through the braid again a few times while I'm here. Help secure it a little bit in place, but also so we can turn around and then start coming back the other way and add our next row of beads. So just go back and forth a few more times and come back up towards these beads that we just added in. And where you then want to make sure to come out from is in that middle bead out of the 3 that we added after the SuperDuo and going back into the braid. So come out through that 3rd one, just following your thread path. And then I've also gotten my other beads ready, so I'm still using SuperDuos. And then I've got my bicones ready, and now also my 15 O seed beads. So instead of using the 11 O's, we're going to basically switch to the 15 O's. And from that point there, I want to then add some beads to make sure the thread isn't showing. So I've got 1 15 O, then I'm going to add 1 bicone, and then 1 15 O. And then I'm going to go through the outer hole in the very first SuperDuo, just like that. Pull my thread all the way through, and then that's going to fill that gap nicely and also make it blend in and be nice and seamless. And then to get into the proper pattern here of adding the next layer, you could say, we then need to go from one SuperDuo to the next right in this section, and to bridge those gaps I'm going to add 1 bicone in between each of those SuperDuos. So I'm going to go from the first one, adding my bicone here to my needle, and then going through the outer hole in the next one. So that's the middle one out of these, and pulling all the way through, and it's going to slot in perfectly there. And then another bicone and through to the next one, and then all the way through. And then what you want to do while you're doing this is make sure to pull tight. Now I've gone all the way through these, I just want to make sure I give it a nice little tug so these line up just nicely and straight next to each other. So now I need to jump from this section with the 3 SuperDuos over to the next one. And I do that by then adding 1 seed bead again of the 15 O's, and then I want to add 3 SuperDuos and then another 15 O. So basically 3 SuperDuos in the middle and then 1 15 O on each side. So we're kind of adding in this next layer, then jump to the next section that's already attached through the very first SuperDuo, going through the outer hole that hasn't been used yet, just like that. And then they're going to end up sitting facing outward again like that, but obviously again they might flip around a little bit. But then from here I need to then fill in these ones in between these SuperDuos that we've already attached. So I do the same as before, just adding 1 bicone in between each one, going from the first one to the next one, and then from that second one adding my bicone and going through to the third one. You keep jumping off here in the outer hole. And just like I said before, make sure you just give a nice little tug so that these beads, the bicones basically in between those SuperDuos, are going to sit nicely next to each other and not really buckle up. And then you want to add this section again. So that was 1 seed bead, 3 SuperDuos, and then 1 seed bead, and jump to the next section that's already attached. Just like this. And you keep going like this here then, all the way until the other end. And then on this end here, we want to repeat what we did in the beginning. So that means I'm going to add 1 seed bead, 1 bicone, and 1 seed bead, just to get that transitioning again. So I then need to go from that very last SuperDuo all the way down to those 3 beads that we added in between the first SuperDuo and the braid in the first level, and go through the middle one out of them. Just get in there and down again towards the braid. So I'm going through those beads and then also through the bead in the braid, so I can then basically go back to the braid and go through it a few times just like before to make sure everything gets secured in place before we then start the next level. And then I just want to pull it tight before I do that to make sure everything, checking it here, is sitting correctly so far. And then like I said, go back and forth through this braid a little bit again, come back up towards the beads on this side again, because then we need to start filling in the very bottom level, you could say, or filling in all these open SuperDuos now. So then I want to make my way back up to the edge here. So I've already started going through those beads that we initially added from the braid to the SuperDuo, but then I need to go through that middle one where we just came down through and then go to the next level out. So I'm just going through really as many beads as I can in the very outer edge, so through the 15-0s, bicones, SuperDuos, and bicone again here. So I want to make my way towards these loose SuperDuos still. I'm just going all the way through there, and I want to make my way to that very last bicone in this section, which is then the first one really, or the last one rather, before we run into the first section with the loose SuperDuos. So just go through that, come out on the other side of that bicone. So there we go, nicely. And then we need to add in the last set of beads here all the way along the edge. So this is really quite simple. From the bicone that we're coming out from now, I want to add in another bicone, just one. And then I'm going to go through the outer hole in the very first SuperDuo out of these loose ones, and then pull that, make sure it pulls tight. Then we're going to add another bicone because we're now basically at the same principle as the previous level, where we're going to just fill in the gaps between these SuperDuos, and I'm just going to do that using one bicone at a time and just putting that in between, and then adding another one for the next SuperDuo, just like that. And then here on the other side, that's basically the same as right at the beginning, so I also want to add a bicone to that and then go through the first bicone on the other side of this section here, the ones that are already in the piece. And then what I want to do is go through, you can go through as many beads as you can at a time. So right now I'm going through that bicone, the SuperDuo in the outer hole, and the next bicone, because I want to come out from that bicone there then to then basically start and repeat this for the next section of the loose SuperDuos. Pull this all the way through, just do it gently here so don't get tangled up with the thread. So there we go, I now have my thread ready for the next one. And then what you want to make sure to do now is every time you made a little section here, I like to kind of keep hold of it with my fingers and then just pull nice and tight at the thread, because you kind of need to do this as you go, because once we get all the way to the other edge, it's going to be really difficult, if not impossible, to really pull this tight if it's a bit loose further back. So I recommend doing that now after each section. And here we just start again. This is just repeating the first one that we already did from that first bicone. Add another one and then go through the first SuperDuo in the outer hole that hasn't been used, and then fill in the gaps between each SuperDuo with another bicone. Just like that. And the last one. And then we're at the end. And then here again, add a bicone, go through the first one in this section in the previous layer, and go out through the last one of it, and then you're ready for the next one. So just keep repeating this again all the way to the other end. So this is then what it looks like once I reached all the way to the other end again. And then I just continued a bit, and really what you want to do then is go back down through the same thread path, back through the braid again, a few times back and forth, come back up, and then what I'm going to do is tie off the thread, and I'm actually going to do that in this bead work up here. So go back through the braid like I said, come back up towards these beads that we added in, and then I'm going to show you how I finish it off. So I'm then coming out right before the very first bicone here, and this is where I want to start tying off knots using the remaining of my thread. So I'm going to do it in front of pretty much every bicone, and what I'm going to do is it's coming out before it, then I'm going to take my needle up through the gap that's inside of it there, and then pull my thread through, but not all the way. Make sure to leave a little loop that I'm then going to go through once, and then bring in that all them threads to that same side of the bicone, making sure they stay there. So when I tighten this, the knot that forms on that side in front of the bicone, and then I'm going to take my needle and go through the bicone. So basically continuing the same thread path, and then also through the next little seed bead, and also through the SuperDuo there. So I then come out in front of the next bicone on the outer edge. I'm just going to grab a pair of chain nose pliers. It's a bit easier to sometimes get a grip of the needle. I'm struggling a bit to get through here. So just get through as many beads as you can in one go. If you need to take one bead at a time, that's absolutely fine. But then you want to pull your thread all the way through. So it's a bit tight here, so just do it gently. Make sure you avoid any knots. Just going to get my tail through as well because that's a bit in the way. That's that one there, and then it becomes much easier. Then as I'm pulling that through, you pull it nice and tight, you can hear a little click or feel it. That knot has now gone into the bicone, so it's basically hidden away and also nice and secure. And then here in front of the next bicone, I can tie my next knot. So put your needle from below up through that gap, making sure you stay inside of those SuperDuos as well, and pull your thread through. So you have a little loop here, and keep hold of it. Then I want to go through that once, and then just bring the threads in the right place on the right side of the bicone, and then pull this tight. And then once it's tight, make sure to go through your bicone. You can do a few beads at a time to basically get to the next point where you want to make your next knot. Bring it all the way through. And then again, as we pull this tight, making sure I don't get any knots again. That knot is going to go inside of the bead, so it's out of the way again. So just keep doing this all the way. Basically use up your thread if you can all the way along. It's going to make it really nice and secure. Otherwise do a few beads, or rather a few knots, sorry. And then once you've done your last one, wherever you do it, make sure you go through a few beads before you cut off the excess of the thread. So then once I got rid of my thread here, I have the embellishment on the braid all done. So we have that hanging nicely in the middle. So all this has to do, if you haven't done it already, is finish off the very ends of the braid. So obviously we can attach our clasp as well. So I'm going to use the Kumihimo ends for that. I already have a tutorial where I show how to do that. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description box below if you haven't seen that before, if you don't know how to do that. Finish them off, attach your clasp, and then you'll have your finished necklace. So this is then my necklace completely done, after I've then also attached my Kumihimo ends and my clasp. So that's what it looks like. You can obviously use whatever clasp you want to. So this is the necklace and the final result. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial here, and thank you very much for watching.